Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. My name is Tilly. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in so long. I missed you. I am a strength and conditioning coach with my bachelor's and my master's in exercise and sports science. If you're new here, welcome. What's your name? How you doing? Today I'm going to be teaching you guys about some basic training theories in exercise science. These theories help to underpin a lot of the decisions that we make when working with athletes or with clients, and they help us with our programming for ourselves. So it's really important that we understand the theories that I'm going to talk to you about today. It's going to be particularly important if you want to keep progressing your training, and it's absolutely important if you're wanting to stay healthy and recover appropriately from the demands that you're putting on yourself. We need to understand the theories of training because the success of our training interventions is based on our ability to manage recovery and the adaptive processes. As always, guys, before we get into it, it would be amazing if you could like and subscribe to help show some support to the channel and help it grow, and it'll mean that you get to stay up to date of some really cool sports science discussions. So what are you waiting for? The first theory that we're going to talk about today is called supercompensation, and I'm sure you might have heard of this before. We're going back in time for this theory and for all the others too. This theory was presented in 1967 by Yakovlev. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right. And the supercompensation theory is essentially to explain what happens to our body in response to a single workout or training session. We've got 4 different phases here. Now the first phase happens directly after a workout, and it usually lasts for about 1 to 2 hours. It's a catabolic phase, and so that means it's characterized by fatigue and reduced work capacity, which probably sounds familiar, right? Because after a workout, we get tired and we probably wouldn't be able to perform at our very best. But what's really cool is that after this phase, our body begins to recover and it begins to build again. And so we move into this second phase, which is still usually characterized by a lot of fatigue, but we also get a pronounced recovery or work capacity as we begin to slowly approach that baseline again. Now for the third phase, which is the namesake phase, it is a period where we get supercompensation. This means that our performance actually improves beyond the baseline that we started at prior to us working out in the first place. The actual time it takes to get this response depends on how much work we did in the session and our recovery practices, although approximately it would probably be around 48 hours. The final phase in this supercompensation theory is the involution phase, and this occurs when there is a reduction in work capacity, until theoretically we would return to our baseline performance level, or maybe even somewhere below. So I mean, that was pretty simple to understand, right? We have our workout, then our recovery goes down, and then it picks back up after a little while, and we get an elevated performance. There is a caveat to this though. If we don't recover appropriately, and we're continuously exposed to a new stimulus or a high intensity stimulus, then our body won't go through that supercompensation response where it elevates our performance. Some of you asked me to further justify why we shouldn't train to failure, and I mean, we can use this training theory to explain it. Imagine you're going through that second phase where your body is trying to recover, and then you dump on another session where you're performing at maximal intensity. We would just slip back into another phase of marked fatigue. Our performance would just keep decreasing. So I mean, we have to be careful when we pick and choose when we train to failure, right? Based on that theory, yeah. Now another theory that can help us explain this and can help us with our programming and our training is the general adaptive syndrome, or GAS. Now that we know the supercompensation theory, this is going to start to look pretty familiar. The GAS principle also has 4 phases. They're just called something a little bit different. Number 1 is the alarm phase, and it is the initial phase of training. It is where a stimulus is first recognized by our body, and generally performance decreases during this phase as a response to the fatigue that we've accumulated in that session or in that workout. If we recover appropriately, then we move into phase number 2, which is the resistance phase. And this is where the adaptation occurs, and our body, or the system in question, returns to a baseline. In most instances, it'll be elevated a little bit above baseline. If it elevates above the baseline, this is where we have phase number 3, the supercompensation phase. This means we will have reached a new level of performance capacity in response to the adaptive process that we underwent in phase 2. If you kind of try and conceptualize this, according to those diagrams that I've popped up, if we go through another stimulus after that supercompensation phase and before that involution kind of phase, then we'd start this process over again. And that's how we'd achieve an even higher level of performance. Now, the GAS theory also has a 4th phase, and this is the overtraining phase. If the training or the life stresses that we encounter are too high and we can't move through that period of recovery, then our performance can be decreased even further. And ultimately, we end up overtraining, we might get an injury, we might get an overload injury, and that's not what we want, right? So we have to make make sure that we're giving ourselves appropriate rest. Now, there have been some researchers that critique the use of the gas theory, particularly in how it relates to resistance training or exercise. Based on those researchers' interpretation of the original literature, they state that because the original literature on the gas theory was created talking about how toxic doses of stressing agents can cause our body to adapt or not adapt, then it has no relevance to the training process. However, gas provides us with a model for understanding the relationship between stress, fatigue, and adaptation. It allows us to conceptualize how stressors of all forms impact our training. What's really cool about this theory is that it not only holds up in regards to resistance training, but also in regards to a wide array of stressors. For example, social stress, like stress in our interpersonal lives and relationships. For example, you can see here how our body responds to a low psycho-emotional stressor. So something not really stressful, but enough to cause a little bit of an issue. So you can see it goes through that pattern and all of those phases. And here you can see how our body responds to something highly stressful. There's a big response there, right? And it's that same basic pattern of the general adaptive syndrome. I mean, this theory essentially helps us to understand that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, provided we're able to recover appropriately. There are so many things in our life that can cause us to go through that cycle of the general adaptive syndrome. So we always have to make sure that when we're taking into account the load that we're putting on our body, we're considering things in the gym and the field as well as in our personal lives. So I want you all to think of that general adaptive syndrome as a summation of multiple factors occurring in our life. For example, our genetics, our nutrition, our psychological status, our training process, and our daily lives. All of that contributes to how our body responds to stress. Something incredibly important to note, however, and this we can directly apply to our training, is that adaptation only occurs if an organism is exposed to a stimulus to the quality or intensity of which it is not adapted. So we need to do things that are challenging in order for us to grow. We need to get outside of our comfort zone. And I mean, that doesn't just apply to training, does it? I wish we could just stay in our comfort zone to grow. I'd be very, very happy there. No, but pushing ourselves is good. Hopefully the understanding of an actual theory in exercise science that can help us understand that and remind us that we need to push and we need to challenge ourselves in order to grow. Now, the last theory we're going to look at, guys, is called the fitness fatigue model. This one is pretty self-explanatory, but lucky for you, I'm going to explain it anyways. This theory just talks about how our body responds to training. So when we have a training stimulus, our fitness is elevated, but the cumulative fatigue that we experience from training decreases our overall preparedness. When we have less exposure to training, or we have lower training loads, our preparedness begins to go up. So it begins to become optimized because fatigue is lower. Fatigue dissipates at a faster rate than fitness does. But we can't remain at that point of high preparedness forever. If you remember back to that gas theory or the supercompensation theory, we have that period of involution where our training gains begin to fade off. We need more stimulus. We need another stimulus to help us. Otherwise, like I just said, our body is going to go through that period of involution where that preparedness will drop off, but so will that fitness. And ultimately, if we don't get another stimulus, then that fitness may decrease even below that baseline that we started at. The after effects of how fitness and fatigue respond are exercise and volume specific and intensity specific. For example, in one of my other videos, I explained how the upper body recovers more quickly than the lower body. So they would have different points of elevated preparedness and elevated fitness. Furthermore, our lower body recovers even more quickly than our lower back. So if we were to take this theory and kind of apply it to a real life situation, let's say that you had a rugby match on the weekend. You might put your more challenging lower body exercises earlier on in the week so that you give your body enough time to recover. And similarly, if you had to do a lower back exercise, because it's going to cause a really large fatigue response which may reduce your preparedness, you'd probably want to put that relatively early in the week as well. An excerpt from a book that was written by my professor really explains that fitness and fatigue paradigm quite nicely. If adequate rest, recovery, or reductions in training load are implemented, fatigue will be dissipated, resulting in an elevated preparedness. If these reductions in training stimuli are continued for too long, there's also going to be a reduction in fitness, resulting in a state of involution, or detraining, which will negatively affect the athlete's overall preparedness. And that is an amazing summary, right? This also has relevance to our tapering practices before a big event or a big match, but we'll talk about tapering and all that stuff in another video in the future. Now, I haven't really gone into the practical applications there, guys, but I think you can start to get the idea of how these theories affect everything that we do in the gym and in our conditioning practices. They help us decide when to train and how much to train. And I think it's really, really cool how we're able to look at this and understand in a little bit more detail how our body responds to a new stimulus or something that is challenging for it. I hope you guys learned something new, and as always, if you can like and subscribe, that would be amazing. I hope you can start thinking about how these training theories apply to your own programming practices or your own training. If you have any ideas or any thoughts about how it directly impacts your training, thinking about these theories and keeping them in mind, then I'd love to hear it down in the comments below. If you have any questions, you can also let me know down there. Have an amazing week ahead, guys. I will see you next time.